Alicia, what are you doing in the dark? I wanted to quickly film this intro for my stretch video. If you want to skip over to it right away, it will be here. Timestamp. There you go. I wanted to make sure that you guys know that this is not a follow along, but more so what stretches can you do to help you with your splits. I tailored it specifically for beginners, but I also know that sometimes I don't modify things or break down stretches enough. And please let me know if you need something more to be broken down, you need another modification, variation, whatsoever. I know the time old question is, how long will it take me to get a split? I can't answer that because it all depends on several factors. If you are currently injured, if you have a history of injuries, how old you are, how tight you are currently, how much stretching you have done before you started this video, if you dance, if you do gymnastics, if you have something chronic, if you run into an injury during your progress, it will certainly delay it. How much you practice. I would recommend that you do this maybe 3 to 5 times a week, each of the stretches to hold up to a minute. Any of the dynamic work that goes back and forth probably will do it 3 to 5 times and you hold it at the end. And that's about it, friends. I would love to do more stretch videos. I want to do more beginner videos because I feel people need a lot more breakdown so they know how to get into certain positions safely and stay in it for longer instead of feeling freaked out when they enter it. Head over to my Instagram if you want to see more of my movement content, as well as my website if you are NYC and want to take any classes. So without further ado, if you want to see this video on how to attain splits for beginners, then please keep on watching. Let's start with the warm-up, some high knee pulls to get into the hips. I also combine a step-step open squat sequence that gets the legs worn well. You can bring the hands to your thighs for more support or bring them lower for a little more intensity. And then I combine a high knee pull with a low squat. Again, hands on the thighs for support if you undergo any low back issues. And moving in to a knee pull from the side, and you'll see I push my standing hip forward to get those glutes active because we're going to need that for our low lunges coming after this warm-up sequence. Simplest thing you can do as well is just go for a jog or trot. It doesn't have to be nuts. Lateral shuffles and skips to get the body temperature up so you can prepare it for the dynamic exercises we just went through and for the stretching to come. Starting with the split squat, and I emphasize pushing the back hip forward, and you see I'm leaning forward on purpose so you can see the difference, how important it is to keep the torso upright and to scoop the glutes in and up the legs when you straighten your knees, because this is not just hanging out and locking off the knees. You want to squeeze the legs up and get them fired up for the low lunge stretches to come. Moving into our active high lunge, where we try to keep the hips as low as possible, hovering the back knee and then straightening it as much as we can, keeping the torso as upright as we can. That's going to emphasize the stretch in the hip flexor, which is crucial for this exercise. Going in on the other side, and I like to do 5 to 10 reps each side, and up to the last rep, you want to find your hips low with your back knee straight, but the torso as upright as you can. For the lunge series, you could get a blanket, a soft pad, and here is our 90-90 lunge. And I'm going back and forth with my pelvis placement so you can see the difference between where we want to be and where we're avoiding to be. You want to bring the pelvis forward, tucking it under, engaging the glutes and opening the hip flexor. That whole front portion of your thigh, you're trying to make a curved shape, pulling the belly away. This is another variation. My hands are on the thigh. You could also interlace the fingers and push the palms away to emphasize that curve. And I flip to the other side again, starting with the pelvic tilt back and forth, but emphasizing that tilt back. Again, I have the pad under my knees so I can really push to the floor. Bringing the hands down to enter a half split position, but this is the position we're trying to avoid. I use blocks, okay, to provide height so that I'm able to keep a neutral spine so it doesn't curve over the leg, and I'm able to actually stretch the hamstrings. And if you find that they're still very tight, here I'm going back and forth, not fully straightening the knee, but just as much as I can so it feels comfortable. And then I move into my pelvic tilt, emphasizing again, tilting the pelvis forward, lengthening over the leg to emphasize the stretching of the hamstring and not just curving the back in order to reach the floor. That is definitely the difference. You see that? We don't want that, okay? Taking to the other side and same thing, practicing the pelvic tilt, going back and forth between bending and straightening the knee. And I take my time here. Take as much time as you need to lengthen without feeling any tightness or feeling any pulling in the legs. I go back and forth around 5 times, and then I'll hold the leg as straight as I can, again with a neutral spine and not curving over. And the blocks help provide that height so I can lengthen and not curve over. A hip bridge interlude, if you will, if you feel the need to warm up your hamstrings even more. Single leg hip bridge with a figure 4 shape, or you keep both feet on the floor, emphasizing the pelvic articulation, rolling up from the mat and rolling down back so that you really squeeze the glutes and activate the hamstrings here. And another hamstring specific exercise is slowly bending and straightening the leg, bringing it into the chest, straightening it to the ceiling, and sweeping it back down. 5 to 10 reps, other side, and you could do 5 one way and 5 the reverse. And this will really help more with the legs, and it's very hamstring specific. And you can keep it simple by just bending and straightening straight up and down. Once they feel good, you can slowly start to pull the leg, but don't bring the torso up to your leg. You only reach if it's close enough to you to keep the knee straight and to keep your back neutral on the floor. This is perhaps a lot easier to feel if your back is neutral as opposed to being on your knees like we were before. Now we enter the low lunge series. Try to avoid as best as you can leaning over your thigh. I have my hands on my belly. I have the blocks on standby. Keep the torso as upright as you can as you're looking to keep your pelvis neutral even in this low lunge position. The low back wants to overextend. Don't let it. Keep the support in the belly and drop that thigh as heavy as you can into the floor. Lifting the arms overhead will add more weight to the shape, and that's totally up to you. Now we move into the quad segment where we slowly start to bend the back knee, heel to butt. Be very careful. This is what will want to happen. You want to pike the hips because it feels more comfortable, but look, you're not getting into your hip flexor at all. Look at that pike. Terrible. Use the blocks to give you a little more height. Keep the hip as low as you can. Squeeze your butt to bring your heel to it. Don't just rely on the hamstrings here. This is an active position. Lots of people just pull heel to butt without actually engaging the glutes, and this is what will happen, okay? Drop that hip down as you pull your heel to butt. You can make it a dynamic exercise. Avoid rolling onto the side of your thigh. That's not where we want to target. Keep it right on the center of your quad. If it starts to feel good, you can drop down to your elbow. This is another position from the inside. Again, look at that pike. Get rid of it. Drop that hip low. Have the block on standby. Keep thigh low, heel to butt, squeeze your tush. We move on to the other side, and this is why I like to have some sort of padding under my knees so I could push it down into the ground, squeeze the glutes while activating my hamstrings, and then when the heel's close enough, get that butt down, get that thigh heavy, and pull your heel to butt. I go back and forth as an alternative means. If it's too painful to hold, just carefully move in and out of it. The moment we've all been waiting for, the split prep. Look at that back leg. It's terrible. Don't do that. Try to keep your thigh down and your hips as square as possible. And I'm going to stop here on purpose because I want you to realize how important it is to not straighten your front knee. Forget about your front knee. Worry about getting your back thigh down. I get rid of the pad. You could get something thinner like a blanket or just another mat. Again, I'm keeping my front knee bent and I'm trying to get the back thigh as low as possible. That's going to ensure that the hips stay square because look what will happen. Don't do it. Don't turn out that back leg in order to get lower. I forbid it. If you are then ready, yes, you can straighten your knee, but again, the hips remain square. And I understand it's a lot of weight on your back thigh, but try to get used to it and don't lean over your front thigh. Use the blocks to create height, a little push up and away from the hips, and eventually you can slide down easily. Test to show that you are indeed square is that if you're able to bend your back knee without using the hands on the floor and truly use the support of your legs to make that activation happen. Even more so, arms overhead, bend the knee, and try to keep yourself from rolling side. I'm going to show you my rehearsal side on purpose because I have a hard time bending my back right knee. It comes up very little, but I'm trying my hardest to activate the glutes so that I don't rely on my hands on the floor to make it happen. And this is a great active strength exercise for flat splits and to ensure that you are indeed square. Bonus wall lunge stretches for the quadriceps and hip flexors. I prop my knee on a block just so it's comfortable and a little higher, and you try to get your back as flush to the wall as possible. This is really intense for the quads. And also stretch number 2, try to drop your thigh down with the torso up, have the blocks on standby. It's a very intense stretch. Again, I flip to the other side, you'll see this one in a moment. Use the blocks on standby just to get a little bit of the weight off your legs. Try your best to move away from your front thigh and drop into that leg. I recommend to hold each stretch for 30 seconds to a minute each, definitely for as much as you take. But before we say goodbye, and as I try to film this thumbnail, thank you for joining me on my beginner stretch split tutorial. Let me know down below what your feedback is, what's helpful, what's not. The next thing I would like to do is a follow along beginner split tutorial on YouTube, followed by a beginner follow along back bend tutorial. Okay, catch you later. Bye.